For what initial purpose did the Sumerians use the wheel they first invented? The potter's wheel. What did the people of Mesopotamia regard as most important? Farming. What was the main reason for the decline of Mesopotamian civilization? Frequent wars and natural disasters. Where was Mesopotamian civilization located? Between the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. What were the main building materials used in ancient Egypt? Limestone and sandstone. Which metal did the people of the Indus civilization mainly use? Bronze. What is the oldest game discovered in the Indus civilization? Checkers. As a guardian of royal tombs and temples, where was the Sphinx mainly erected? In front of pyramids or at temple entrances. Why was mercury made to flow within the tomb of Emperor Qin Shi Huang? In pursuit of immortality. In the Zhou dynasty's feudal system, what was the criterion for determining the territories of vassal states? A distance close enough to attend royal ancestral rites. What natural disaster led to the fall of the Yin, Shang, dynasty? Flooding of the Yellow River. Why did Nebuchadnezzar II of Neo-Babylonia build the Hanging Gardens? To recreate the landscape of his queen's homeland for her. In Babylon, what kind of script was inscribed on clay tablets for writing? Cuneiform. In which fields did Babylon make significant scientific advances? Astronomy and mathematics. What was the main means of transportation in Babylon? Boats on rivers and canals. What was the last capital and cultural center of the Assyrian Empire? Nineveh. As the Neo-Assyrian Empire grew stronger, which language came to be widely used as the imperial lingua franca? Aramic. What were the winged lions and bulls that guarded the entrances of Assyrian palaces? Lamassu figures. How was the Assyrian army primarily composed? Infantry, cavalry, and siege engine units. Which regions did merchants of the ancient Cretan, Minoan, civilization mainly interact with while sailing the Mediterranean? Egypt and Asia Minor. Which architectural structure of the Mycenaean civilization served administrative functions and was the center of economic activity? The Mycenaean Palace. During its peak, with which regions did the Mycenaean civilization primarily conduct trade? Cyprus and Anatolia. What major political measure did the Mycenaean civilization employ to maintain the power of its kings? Policies to strengthen royal authority. What aspect of the Mycenaean civilization is reflected in its manner of worshipping the gods and its principal sacrifices? Polytheistic rituals. What funerary practice of the Mycenaean civilization developed in tomb design, went on to influence later Greek periods? Thalos tomb. What economic factor enabled the Minoan civilization on Crete to maintain a powerful maritime presence? Maritime trade and monopoly commerce. Why were the walls built in the Mycenaean civilization constructed with massive stone blocks? For the purpose of defending against external invasions. In the funerary customs of the Mycenaean civilization, what was the representative type of tomb in which kings and nobles were buried? Thalos tomb. Which ancient Greek city established a militaristic system and enforced a strict educational regime? Sparta. Who was the king of the Titans who swallowed his own children? Kronos. Which mythological hero was celebrated for completing 12 labors? Heracles. Which ancient Greek mathematician established the theorem about right-angled triangles? Pythagoras. In ancient Greece, what was the citizens' assembly that made democratic decisions called? Ecclesia. Which major Greek city-state flourished through commerce and maritime trade? Corinth. Which philosopher is known for presenting the paradoxes of infinite division? Zeno. Which philosopher argued that freedom depends on one's inner attitude? Epictetus. Which field of philosophy explores the role of the state and the nature of justice? Political philosophy. In ancient Athens, what could only free men possess? Citizenship. In ancient Athens, what changes were implemented to improve the political system? Administrative reforms. Before the Battle of Thermopylae, what did the Spartan warriors do? They combed their hair. Why did Athens run the Delos League according to its own will? Monopoly over finances. Why did the Greek navy gain the upper hand at the Battle of Mycale? Lighter ships and greater speed. Which new great power emerged in Greece after the Peloponnesian War? Macedonia. What was the main tactic used by the Greek army in the Battle of Marathon? A tightly packed phalanx formation. What was the name of the shields used by the Greek army in the Battle of Marathon? Hoplite shield. What decision did Xerxes I make after the Battle of Salamis? To withdraw the Persian army. Who was the one and only God worshipped by the Hebrews? Yahweh. What was the famous battle fought between the Hittites and Egypt? Battle of Kadesh. What was the main basis of the Hittite economy? Agriculture and trade. Hannibal was a general of which country? Carthage. In ancient Babylon, what did astrologers use to predict the future? The liver of a sheep. What important measure did Cyrus II grant to the Jews? Permission to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. What was the battle or event in which Cyrus II met his end? The battle against the Massagetae. Who was the last pharaoh of Egypt whom Cambyses II deposed? Psammetichus III. After conquering Egypt, what title did Cambyses II proclaim for himself? Pharaoh of Egypt. Which three major cities did Cambyses II use as his main bases? Memphis, Susa, and Persepolis. In which year did Alexander the Great begin his campaign against Persia? Year 334 BC. In which battle did Alexander the Great first defeat the Persian king Darius III? The Battle of Issus. Which dynasty ruled Macedonia and Greece after the death of Alexander the Great? The Antigonid dynasty. Persepolis was a major royal city of which empire? The Achaemenid Persian Empire. What was the main reason why Alexander the Great destroyed Persepolis? Revenge for the Persian Wars and the destruction of a political symbol. Why did Alexander the Great ascend to the throne? Because of the assassination of his father, Philip II. Which Greek hero influenced Alexander the Great from his childhood? Achilles. What was the name of the famous horse that Alexander the Great tamed in his youth? Bucephalus. Which temple did Alexander the Great visit to confirm that he was the son of a god? The Temple of Ammon at the Siwa Oasis. What famous words did Diogenes say to Alexander the Great? Do not block my sunlight. Through the conquests of which king was Hellenistic culture spread? Alexander the Great. What concept stood at the philosophical center of Hellenism? Anthropocentrism, or humanism. Which ancient Greek philosopher emphasized empirical inquiry and logical reasoning? Aristotle. Which city was the primary center of prosperity for Carthage? Carthage. What unexpected route did Hannibal use to attack Rome? The Alps. During the training process in ancient Sparta, what action was allowed for boys but punished if they were caught? Stealing food. What material was mainly used in the construction of the walls of Babylon? Baked bricks. What was the most famous battle in which the Theban army defeated Sparta? The Battle of Leuctra. How did the Theban army use cavalry on the battlefield? To protect and support the flanks of the phalanx. What kind of battle formation is the phalanx? A dense infantry formation. What core principle did the Spartan army emphasize on the battlefield? Discipline and collective tactics. Who was the most famous general in the Carthaginian army? Hannibal. Which ancient Greek philosopher described human beings as political animals? Aristoteles. Who was the most famous disciple of Socrates the philosopher who wrote the Republic? Plato. According to Aristoteles, what is the best kind of life? A life that practices virtue, a life of the mean. Who was the first emperor in Rome to initiate the persecution of Christians? Nero. What was the space in a Roman house where guests were received? Atrium. What tools did Romans use when writing letters or taking notes? Wax tablets and a stylus. What was the policy called in which Roman citizens were provided with free bread and entertainment? Bread and circuses. What special colored garments did the triumphing general wear during the triumph? A purple tunic and a gold-embroidered toga. What was the basic combat unit of the Roman army? The legion. In siege warfare, what tool did the Roman army use to destroy city walls? A battering ram. Which unit in the Roman army was responsible for long-range reconnaissance and mobility? The cavalry. What was one of the deadliest defeats of a Roman legion, in which it was annihilated by Germanic tribes? The Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. What system did Emperor Diocletian introduce to govern the Roman Empire more effectively? The Tetrarchy, rule by 4. What policy did emperors in the late Roman Empire use to control prices? Price ceilings, maximum price controls. In the late Roman Empire, what lifestyle choice did many citizens make to escape the emperor's heavy taxes and control? They migrated to the countryside. Which king was the second king of Rome and reorganized its religious institutions? Numa Pompilius. Who was the first emperor of the Roman Empire? Augustus. What major disaster occurred during the reign of Emperor Nero? The Great Fire of Rome. In the Roman Republic, which priests were responsible for conducting the state's official religious rites? Pontifex Maximus. As what kind of deities were the kings of the Ptolemaic dynasty officially worshipped? Pharaohs and divine beings. What was the main cause that triggered the Great Migration of the Germanic peoples? The westward pressure of the Huns. When the Roman army was pursuing Hannibal's forces, what ingenious tactic did Hannibal use to escape? He deceived the Roman army with a herd of cattle set on fire. In the feudal system, to whom were the peasants bound? Their lord. For whom did knights fight? Their lord. What was the place of worship within a manor during the feudal era? The church. Why did scholarship and the arts develop together during the Renaissance? Because of human-centered thinking. What happened to the rural population after machines were introduced? They moved to the cities. How did housing conditions change before and after the Industrial Revolution? Urban housing conditions deteriorated. What effect did the appearance of new weapons have on World War I? It prolonged the war. After the war ended, what treaty did defeated Germany sign following World War I? The Versailles Treaty. Why is the war called a total war? Because the entire population was mobilized for the war. How did World War I affect culture and the arts? It led to an increase in nihilism and critical perspectives. What educational institution did Platon establish? The Academy. Why did Plato believe that philosopher kings should rule? Because they are capable of wise judgment. What effect did the advent of the railway during the Industrial Revolution have? It revolutionized transport of goods and people. Why is World War I regarded as the beginning of modern war? Because of new weapons and total mobilization. What effect did the Kingsway built by Darius I have? It strengthened administration and military power. Why did ancient kings place great importance on external conquest? To expand territory and enhance their authority. Which tradition of the Byzantium Empire did the Russian Orthodox Church inherit? The liturgical and architectural traditions of Orthodoxy. Who is regarded as the founder of Islam? Muhammad. What were the commercial events held inside medieval castles called? Market days or fairs. What was the main reason for the growing discontent among peasants in medieval Europe? The burden of taxes and corvée labor. Britain, refusing to yield to German air raids, fought an air campaign. What is this battle called? The Battle of the Britain. During the war, there was a force in France that resisted the Nazis. What was this group called? Free France. Which explorer set sail believing that the Earth is round? Columbus. Why was the depiction of light and shadow so important in Renaissance art? Because it created a sense of three-dimensionality and realism. What common problem did the countries that had fought in World War I face after the war ended? Economic crisis and unemployment. During the Spring and Autumn and Warring States period in China, what school of thought, centered on law and punishment, emerged to impose order? Legalism. Why did European kings sponsor learning and the arts? To gain political legitimacy and prestige. Why can the Byzantium Empire be called the successor of the Roman Empire? Because it inherited Roman institutions and culture. In what way did the Byzantium Empire inherit the institutions of ancient Rome? By maintaining an emperor-centered system. In Buddhism, what is taught as the cause of suffering? Attachment and desire. What is the place that Muslims believe they should visit at least once in their lifetime? Mecca. What is one of the principal sacred texts of Hinduism? The Vedas. What is the ancient, large-scale man-made waterway in China that is well known as a Grand Canal? The Grand Canal. What is the place in Ethiopia where a group of rock-hewn churches is located? Lalibela. Who first unified the Frankish kingdom and converted early to Catholicism? Clovis I. Who was a representative artist and scientist of the Renaissance era? Leonardo da Vinci. For what reason were Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette executed during the French Revolution? Counter-revolutionary charges. Which Greek mathematician and philosopher claimed that the origin of all things is number? Pythagoras. What was the code name of the Normandy landings during World War II? Operation Overlord. Which Greek philosopher was the tutor of Alexander the Great? Aristotle. Who was the leader who founded the Timurid Empire after the breakup of the Mongol Empire? Timur. Which scientist of the Renaissance era advocated the heliocentric theory? Copernicus. What was the main reason King Henry VIII established the Anglican Church in England during the Reformation? His desire to obtain a divorce. What was the incident that sparked the American Revolution, in which colonists were killed when British troops opened fire? The Boston Massacre. In which year did the United States drop an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, Japan, during World War II? Year 1945. In medieval Europe, what was the movement through which cities centered on commerce and handicrafts sought to obtain municipal autonomy? The Commune movement. Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, became the capital of the Ottoman Empire after the fall of Byzantium. What is this city called today? Istanbul. During the Reformation, in which German city were Luther's 95 Theses posted? Wittenberg. What was the economic blockade policy by which Napoleon sought to cut off trade with Britain in order to dominate the European continent? The continental system. In ancient Athens, what was the political system in which citizens directly participated? Direct democracy. What was the name of the edict by which Emperor Constantinus legalized Christianity? The Edict of Milano. What was the name of the radical faction that led the Reign of Terror during the French Revolution? The Jacobins. Which king unified the Frankish kingdom in the early Middle Ages and was crowned Emperor of the Romans? Charlemagne. What was the revolution in 1688 in England that overthrew the absolute monarchy without bloodshed? Glorious Revolution. What was the reform through which Japan ended the shogunate system and moved toward becoming a modern state in the 19th century? Meiji Restoration. What was the Southeast Asian War during the Cold War in which the United States intervened but ultimately ended in a victory for North Vietnam? The Vietnam War. Which people in southern Mesopotamia invented the earliest writing and founded city-states? The Sumerians. What was the public office established in the Roman Republic to protect the rights of the plebeians? Tribunes of the people. Which theologian criticized the sale of indulgences and sparked the Protestant Reformation? Martin Luther. Who led the Puritan Revolution in England? Oliver Cromwell. Who drafted the United States Declaration of Independence? Thomas Jefferson. What was the term for the wealthy middle class after the French Revolution? Bourgeoisie. In medieval European feudal society, what was the term for the relationship of lord and vassal between a lord and a knight? The vassalage system. When did the Meiji Restoration, which led Japan's modernization, begin? Year 1868. Which Islamic scholar wrote the Canon of Medicine, which was used for over 600 years in medieval European medical schools and greatly influenced medical development? Ibn Sina. What was the treaty that imposed harsh reparations on defeated Germany after World War I? The Versailles Treaty. What was the policy that President Roosevelt pursued to overcome the Great Depression in the United States? The New Deal policy. What was the economic opening policy promoted by Deng Xiaoping in China? The policy of reform and opening up. Which empire, with its capital at Nineveh in the 7th century BC, ruled West Asia and Egypt and became infamous for its use of iron weapons and chariot tactics? The Assyria Empire. What was the name of the family that was a powerful patron in Florence during the Renaissance? The Medici family. Which Mughal emperor of India built the Taj Mahal? Shah Jahan. Who was the first black president of South Africa who led the abolition of apartheid? Nelson Mandela. What was the moral code that knights in Western Europe were expected to follow? Chivalry. Who founded the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, and led Catholic reform? Ignatius of Loyola. Which people were the target of the large-scale massacres carried out by the Ottoman Empire during World War I? Armenians. What is the title of the travel account that Marco Polo wrote after visiting China? The Travels of Marco Polo. Which ancient kingdom was home to the Library of Alexandria? The Ptolemaic Kingdom. What was the characteristic type of seafaring ship used by the Viking peoples of Northern Europe? The longship. For what primary purpose were ziggurats used in Mesopotamian civilization? As temples. What was the 1066 invasion that established the Norman dynasty in England called? The Norman Conquest. Which ancient figure, the first to write history systematically, is called the father of history? Herodotus. What is the name of the volcano in southern Italy whose eruption in 79 destroyed Pompeii? Mount Vesuvius. What was the name of the 1545 council that led the Catholic Counter-Reformation? The Council of Trent. In 19th-century Britain, what was the movement of workers demanding electoral reform called? The Chartist movement. What was the organization established after World War I to promote international peace? The League of Nations. What was the name of the communist regime that committed mass killings in Cambodia in the 1970s? The Khmer Rouge. Who was the American track and field athlete who won 4 gold medals at the 1936 Berlin Olympics? Jesse Owens. What is the name of the Edict of 313 in which Constantine proclaimed the legalization of Christianity? The Millennian Edict. What was the name of King William's record book compiled in 1086 after surveying land throughout England? The Domesday Book. What was the name of the historic battle in 1757 in which Britain secured dominance over India? The Plassey Battle. What was the anti-Soviet uprising in a Central European country that the Soviet Union crushed by force in 1956? The Hungarian Revolution. What was the peace treaty of 1648 that brought an end to the European wars of religion? The Westphalian Treaty. What form of government was established in France after the Paris Commune? The Third Republic. In the 1920s United States, what was the bobbed hair fashion that symbolized young women's culture called? The flapper style. What was the name of the communist military alliance that crushed the Prague Spring in 1968? The Warsaw Pact. What was the economic crisis that began in the United States in 1929 and spread around the world? The Great Depression. Which event symbolized the space race between the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War? Sputnik launch. Which Persian physician of the Islamic Golden Age was known as the father of medicine? Ibn Sina. Which general led the parliamentary forces to victory in the English Civil War? Oliver Cromwell. Which Union general became the 18th President of the United States after the Civil War? Ulysses Simplicius Grant. Thank you for watching until the end. We'd love to hear your feedback and historical insights in the comments. Your support helps us create even more history quizzes. Let's keep exploring together.